The locker that screams. The locker stood at the very end of the east wing. It was dented, its paint chipped, and the lock had to be jiggled just right to open. Nobody wanted it. But in September of 1974, it was assigned to a sophomore named Kelly Hughes. On the second day of school, she came to the office pale and shaking. She said she'd heard someone crying inside her locker. Not faint, not imagined, muffled sobs pressed against the metal. The vice principal laughed it off, telling her she was probably hearing pipes. By the end of the week, 2 more students complained. They said the crying sometimes turned into whispers, words they couldn't quite understand. Others reported scratching sounds, like nails dragging down the inside of the locker door. One Friday afternoon, a student named Mark decided to prove it was all a prank. A group gathered in the hallway after last bell. Mark opened the locker wide. It was empty. He climbed inside, slammed the door shut from the inside, and told his friend to count to 30 before opening it again. It was silent at first. Then came the pounding. Then came the screams. Mark's voice was high-pitched, frantic, begging to be let out. When the door was yanked open, he collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He wouldn't say what happened in there. He just refused to ever set foot in that hallway again. 2 weeks later, the locker was unbolted from the wall and removed. The space where it had been was sealed over with plaster. But some nights, if you press your ear to the far wall of the east wing, you can still hear it, that muffled, desperate crying coming from somewhere behind the plaster.
The basement hallway. The first rule at Kamezawa High was simple. Don't go down to the basement after dark. The second rule, never look into the last storage room at the end of the hallway. Aya learned about those rules on her first day, but she didn't believe them. She thought it was just another ghost story upperclassmen used to scare freshmen. Until one rainy evening, when she stayed late to finish cleaning duty. The janitor's closet on the first floor was out of soap, and she knew there were extra supplies in the basement storeroom. The stairwell was narrow, steep, and reeked faintly of damp wood and mold. The light at the bottom buzzed weakly, throwing long shadows across the hallway. The lockers down there were old, dented, some still bearing name tags from decades ago. Halfway down the hall, Aya heard it, a shuffle, like bare feet sliding across the floor. She froze, turning her head toward the end of the hallway. There was a door there, slightly open. Through the crack, she saw an eye. It blinked slowly, then rolled upward, disappearing from view. And then she heard footsteps, not walking toward her, but walking along the ceiling. The fluorescent light above her flickered violently, and she caught a glimpse of something, a figure crawling upside down, its head twisted completely backward, staring at her with that same unblinking eye. Aya dropped the soap bottle and bolted up the stairs. When she reached the top, she slammed the basement door shut and nearly screamed when the janitor was standing there. He looked at her pale face and just sighed. "You looked, didn't you?"
The Vanishing Track Star. By the time the other runners had packed up and left, Claire Porter was the only one still on the track. The November air was cold, her breath visible in the dim glow of the stadium lights. She told her coach she wanted one more lap. That was the last time anyone saw her. West Ridge High's track field sat on the edge of town, backed by a stretch of woods that looked pitch black at night. It was the kind of place you didn't linger alone. Claire's backpack and water bottle were found on the bleachers the next morning. Her running shoes sat neatly side by side at the edge of the track, like she'd just stepped out of them. Her best friend, Jamie, swore she saw Claire after practice that night. Not on the track, but at the far end of the field, near the tree line. She was standing still, Jamie said, like she was listening to something in the woods. When Jamie called out, Claire didn't turn. She just walked into the darkness, disappearing between the trees. Police searched for days. They brought in dogs, helicopters, even volunteers combing through the brush. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint. The only thing they found was a single track spike buried in soft earth 20 feet into the woods. It was driven into the ground at an angle, as if she had been pulled down mid-run. A month later, the track team returned to train. It was early evening, the sun gone. Jamie was running her laps when she saw a figure at the far end of the field. It was wearing a track uniform, barefoot. Jamie froze, her chest tightening. The figure turned slowly and smiled. She swears it was Claire. The school fenced off the woods after that, but sometimes, on quiet nights, runners say they can hear footsteps keeping pace with them, even when the track is empty. This is inspired by the 1990s disappearance of a high school athlete in rural Illinois. Police reports confirm she vanished after staying late for solo training. Her belongings were found neatly left behind, but no trace of her was recovered. The CCTV mystery. The security guard swore the footage was normal when he left for his dinner break. Just a girl walking down the empty hallway. But when he came back 30 minutes later and rewound the tape, he saw something that made his stomach drop. The school had just installed CCTV in all the main corridors. One of the cameras caught a student, 17-year-old Mia Clark, walking toward the library. It was just after 6 p.m., long after classes ended. Her steps were slow, almost hesitant. Every few seconds, she'd glance over her shoulder. Halfway down the hall, Mia suddenly stopped. She turned her head sharply, as if she'd heard something. Then, the lights above her began to flicker. The footage showed her looking up and smiling. There was no one there. The next seconds were chaotic on the tape. Mia dropped her books, and her body snapped backward violently, like someone had grabbed her by the collar and yanked hard. Her shoes squealed against the tile as she was dragged, backwards, down the hallway, faster and faster, until she vanished into the dark frame at the far end. When the police reviewed the footage, they noticed something chilling. In the last frame before she disappears, there's a shape behind her. Tall, thin, with limbs too long to be human. Its face was nothing but static, as if the camera itself refused to capture it. Mia was never found. The official report says she left the building and possibly ran away. But the guard, who'd worked there for 15 years, still watches the footage on his phone sometimes. He swears that when he slows it down, just before the thing grabs her, you can see her mouth move. She's mouthing the words, "It's here again." Inspired by an actual missing persons case from the early 2000s, in which the last known sighting was on school CCTV. While official accounts say she left through a side exit, the original guard statement, now buried in reports, described unexplainable movement and distortion on the footage.
The last bell. It was 2:17 a.m. when Officer Daniel Royce's patrol car radio crackled. Motion sensors had gone off at Westbrook High. And then, seconds later, the fire alarm started ringing. By the time he pulled up, the sound was deafening in the empty street. The main entrance was locked. No lights were on inside, except for the red flashing of the alarm strobes, painting the hallways in bursts of color. He stepped inside, calling out in case a janitor was working late. No answer. The alarm bell kept clanging down the hall, and with every ring, the fluorescent lights flickered, as if the building itself was reacting to the sound. He followed the noise toward the gymnasium and froze. A line of students stood in the hallway, shoulder to shoulder, facing the wall. They were completely still, their uniforms covered in soot and ash. One of them turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see her face. Charred, the skin cracked like burnt paper. Her mouth moved in silence, and then the others began to whisper in unison. It was a date, March 12th, 1989. That was the year a fire tore through Westbrook High, killing 12 students in the gym during a winter assembly. The fire alarm had malfunctioned that day, ringing after the flames had already filled the building. Officer Royce backed away slowly, his boots squeaking on the tile. The moment he crossed the threshold into the main hall, the line of students vanished. The alarm bell stopped, and the only sound left in the building was the faint echo of that date, whispered again and again, as if the walls themselves refused to forget. Inspired by multiple accounts from security guards and police responding to schools after hours where bells or alarms went off for no reason, sometimes linked to past tragedies in the building's history. The locker room door. They say every school has that one place. A hallway no one likes to walk down. A door no one likes to open. At Westford High, that place was the old girls' locker room in the East Wing. It had been sealed for years after a student went missing there during an after-hours basketball practice. They never found her. Emma was a sophomore when she got dared to go inside. It was late, the hallways quiet. The only light came from the exit sign at the end of the corridor. The door was chained shut, but the lock was old, and one good twist on the rusted handle made the chain drop to the floor. The air inside was damp, heavy with the smell of mildew and something faintly metallic. The lockers stood open, each one rattling softly, though there was no breeze. She was halfway across the room when she heard it. A locker door slamming shut behind her, then another, and another, each slam closer than the last. Emma turned, shining her phone's flashlight toward the sound, and froze. There was a girl standing at the far end of the row. Pale skin, wet hair hanging over her eyes. Her gym uniform clung to her as if she had just stepped out of the shower. The girl tilted her head slowly, then lifted one hand to point directly at Emma's locker, the one she'd used since the start of the year. Emma bolted for the door, but when she reached it, the chain was back in place. The janitor found her an hour later, curled up in the corner, shaking and muttering the same words over and over. She's still in there. She knows my name. This is based from a real 1990s case in Illinois, where a student reportedly vanished after staying late for sports practice. The locker room was later closed off permanently, with rumors of sightings persisting for years. Local police reports confirmed the missing person case, though no supernatural details were recorded.
That's all for this story. I hope this helped calm your racing mind and put you in a sleepy mood. Sweet dreams. See you next time.